Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Female Empowered Podcast. I'm your host. Well, I'm normally your host, Christa Gurka, but today we are going to flip the script a little bit and we are going to make Latasha Doyle, founder and CEO of Uncanny Content, the host of today's show. So, welcome, host.
Thank you. I am so excited to be taking the mic today.
I am very excited to be having you. Latasha has been around since day one of the podcast. She was actually one of the very people that encouraged me to do a podcast and has taken a lot of the work and responsibility of making it happen and making it only be me talking. So what we're actually going to feature for the month of November, for the most part, are business stories. So people can hear a variety of different business stories. And we decided to kick it off with Latasha interviewing me about my business story. So I'm going to let you take the lead, Latasha, who said she was very excited about this interview.
I'm so excited. I think you have a
Yeah.
great story, but I also think that it's just a fun discussion. So,
Well, thank you. I also was worried she was going to like punk me or something. By the way, if you're sending like Matthew McConaughey to my house, I'd be like very excited about that.
I wouldn't be sending him to your house. He would be coming to mine.
Ooh. So
All right. Are you ready for your first
I
question?
am ready for my interview. Yes, I am.
Okay. What made you decide to become a business owner?
Eesh. That's interesting. I don't even I never thought of myself as a business owner, to be honest, when I opened my first business. So I was working at a physical therapy practice that did Pilates. Like we had Pilates-based physical therapy. And it was an insurance-based clinic. And I used to say, like, we have all these people that love Pilates when they're done, and we're sending them to studios. So this was in 2000, I don't know, no, 5 or 6, 2005 or six. And so we were sending them to all these studios around the city. And I said to my boss one time, I was like, this just seems so silly. Wouldn't it be great if we could have like 4 or 5 reformers and keep people here for classes? And he was like, that's a great idea. Go ahead and do it. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, and even when I opened it, I didn't consider myself like a business owner. It was almost like a project that my boss gave me to do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to manage this project. So I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I had no intention of ever being a business owner.
When did you realize you had one?
Yeah, that's a great question. When did I realize I had a business? Um, I think it was really when I decided I think I wanted to leave the clinic altogether and said, because when I first opened, I was doing, I guess you would call it like a side hustle. So I was still full time at my clinic, being a PT. And then we opened this. My first studio was actually my boss, myself, and two of my patients wanted, because I was talking to them one time about it, and they were like, I was like, oh yeah, so Alex told us I should do this. And they're like, oh my gosh, you totally should. We would do it with you. And so I was like, okay. And they were very ingrained in the community, like very much, I would say, influencers in the community, knew a lot of people. So I thought, okay, cool. Like they would bring all the people, I would do all the work, which is really what happened. And so I don't know. I guess when I finally was like, okay, I guess I could leave the clinic and like this could be my whole thing. And then I realized, oh shit, maybe I am a business owner. But my thought was always like, if it goes south, if it goes south, and I've always said this about everything. Like I waited tables, I bartended myself to put myself through college. I was like, if anything goes wrong, I will work at a Hillstones. Like I will be a bartender at a restaurant. Like I will be fine. And so when I finally was like, oh, I'm a business owner, I'm like, you know what? If things go sideways, I'll go get a job as a physical therapist in a hospital. Like I just knew that I could go back to whatever I was doing before. It wasn't
Do
like I
you think,
invested my life savings into a business like some people do.
yeah, do you think that the knowledge that you had skills and potential jobs to fall back on made you more confident in starting your business?
It didn't help me at all in knowing what to do about business. Like it just made me realize I had zero knowledge of how to run a business. I knew I was a really good therapist and I was a good Pilates instructor and I was a good like at customer service. Like I think because I worked in restaurants for so long, like just having that, like seeing things that other people don't see and anticipating. Maybe it took the fear out of it a little bit of just like, or maybe it was just my mindset of like, if it goes wrong, like I can go get a job. I do have skills that I could use.
Yeah. So you left the clinic, you started, did you name it Pilates in the Grove at that time?
No. So it was called Pilates on the Beach because it was on Miami Beach. And the little I knew about SEO at the time was like, well, people will search Pilates on the beach. And so I was like, let's just name it Pilates on the beach. And when I first opened, I was still working full time at the clinic for probably 2 years until we opened a second location in Miami Beach. And that's when I was like, I'm out. And so I resigned. We were at Miami Beach. And then shortly thereafter, we decided, well, I decided I wanted, by then I had moved off of Miami Beach. So I wanted to open one in Coconut Grove, which is like another little village, district, suburb, whatever of Miami. And so that is kind of when the partnership stuff started going awry at that time when
The
I
two
opened
people
Pilates and
who
Grove.
had been at the clinic with your previous boss.
Correct. So at the time, they were not Pilates anything, right? So, listen, now that I look back on it, like 10 years in the future, I like things the way I like them. I'm very much of a control freak. I am, yes. And even though I feel like I'm way better now, like with self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Back then, I just thought it was like, I had a big ego. And the truth was like I was the product. They were not Pilates certified. And so just as time went on, I just felt like, and again, I'm gonna say it's my feeling, it's my experience, it's probably a quarter of the story. I felt like I was doing a lot of the work, and because of the operating agreement, we were sharing everything equally.
Mm.
And so I don't know. It got to the point that like it was just I just wasn't happy. I was miserable and I was like, God, we work so hard. I don't even want to be, we couldn't even be in the studios together. Like things got really, and I'm sure that trickled down into like the culture and stuff like that. And so when I opened Pilates in the Grove, I was going to do it on my own. And that obviously you can imagine triggered, there was no non-compete in our operating agreement. So I could have. And then, of course, I was like, I hate confrontation. So I was like, okay, well, I just want to be majority owner. And
Yeah.
we did that for a couple years until finally we basically got divorced. And so they bought me out of Pilates. Well, I basically walked away from Pilates on the beach and bought them out of Pilates in the Grove in order to make it work. You
And that
know,
was like 2 years into the Coconut Grove
that
location.
was probably like 2 years, maybe 18 months to 2 years into Coconut Grove,
Was that a
and
pretty significant financial setback?
it was at the time, and especially because I was basically like, well, why don't we just swap shares? You have, I had 25% shares in Pilates on the Beach. They had cumulatively 20% shares in Pilates in the Grove. And so I said, well, why don't you just take my 25% and I'll take your 20%? And they were like, oh, no, 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 no. Like because in the contract, I technically couldn't like I couldn't sell without their approval for 10 years. So I've learned a lot about agreements. And my attorney at the time kept saying, do you want to be right or do you want to be done? I'll never forget this. He just kept saying to me, do you want to be right or do you want to be done? And I was like, I want to be both.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's not the option. I'm like, well, that's not the choice I want. And he's like, well, okay, if you want to be both, then what's going to happen is I'm the only one that's going to make money. And so he was right. And so, yeah, it was a significant, and especially at that time, I didn't have a lot of money. The business didn't have a lot of money. And it also felt like walking away from something that I helped grow. which is still open today, and they're still doing great, and they're still the owners, and it's great. But in hindsight, it was the right thing to do at the time. And so in about 2012 around, I became sole owner, 100% owner of Pilates in the Grove, and no longer owner of Pilates on the Beach.
Wow. After that, like, divorce, is that when things kind of totally changed for Pilates in the Grove?
Yeah, we did a rebranding. So we kind of did a new logo. We still kept the name. We did a little bit of a rebranding in that, you know, it was now nothing was really going to change, but I was the sole owner. And then basically I could kind of do things how I wanted. We were changing staff a little bit because some of the people decided to stay over there. But then I didn't have to ask anyone for money. Like I didn't have to ask anyone anything. I was just like, this is what I want to do. We're going to move forward. Um, yeah. So that was kind of it. I was like full speed ahead. Let's do it.
Is that was that a time where you felt like you wanted to close up shop?
No, that was a time I was like, this is mine. Now I get to do everything
Yeah.
how I want it.
I didn't know if there was a like, oh, screw this. I just want to be done totally.
No, at that time, no, I hadn't. When I opened the Grove, I thought that that would be my way out of like feeling like that. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And then when I got it all to my own, I was like, no, now we're like full speed ahead. I was definitely like grow, 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 grow.
Okay. Um, I'm curious. I think I know the answer to this because I've worked with you for over 4 years now. When, at what point did you want to close up shop, if ever?
Yeah. I could actually probably find it on my phone at some point. But after I opened what would have been my third location, which is the second Pilates in the Grove location, there was it just got very overwhelming. You know, I didn't set up the right systems and structures in place. I was doing everything. I was also doing everything because I wanted to control everything, which meant that I didn't teach people how to do things the right way. And so I'll never forget, I remember this day exactly. Someone that I'm still friends with her actually now, and I think she's a delightful human being. She was one of our administrators. And my two managers at the time, we were having a discussion in the front lobby, and she said to me, was calling her attention to something, and she was like, "You are the biggest hypocrite, egomaniac I've ever met in my life. If you, if we weren't here, like, I'm only here because I want to be here for the clients because I think that their interests wouldn't be served or something if I wasn't here." And then I asked my managers, and then I was like, "What do you think?" And no one said anything. Like everyone was just like quiet, right? And so I remember getting into my car and bawling my eyes out and calling my husband and being like, I fucking hate it. Oh, I want to burn it to the ground. I hate these people. I hate everyone. I did like a woe is me like thing. I even remember talking to my accountant and one of my clients who was like in a VC company about like they basically acquired distressed businesses, but I was like, okay, what's the process? How do I do this? Basically let myself cry and bitch and complain and was like, listen, I don't think I want to burn it down, but it's my fault in some sense that the business is like this. And so that's when I really was like, okay, I'm going to make the changes in both myself and in the business structure in order for this to keep going. Because it definitely can't keep going like this, the way that it is. Yeah.
You were
So
overwhelmed. Your team was not um, quite happy with the leadership, it sounds
no,
like.
no.
So it just felt like a tipping point where you're just
It
like,
was, yeah, it was bad. Like, and I was probably bad because I was probably so overwhelmed that I was probably like a disaster at work. I was probably sure. And I've spoken about this. Like, I have a very direct communication style. Um, because I think a lot of founders do because they're thinking of 50 million things. And I don't always take other people's feelings into consideration and my tone sometimes. And I recognize that. And at the time, it was probably a gazillion times worse,
yeah.
right? And I also had this mentality of like, they should all be so thankful to me that I do everything. And I'm like, no, they're doing their job. Like I should be thankful to them. It was a total like mindset shift of, you know, putting myself at cause, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say it's more of a therapy problem, right? But
Oh, yeah.
so much of what business is, as your business grows, is you're kind of like, it holds up a mirror, right? So
Mhm.
is that something that you would have said like business coaching would have helped you with? Or was it strictly like, I need to work on myself in a therapy setting?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was both. Because
Mhm.
the truth is, I had to work on myself for me to recognize like what are some of the things that I was reacting to personally that I needed to be better. I needed to be a better leader for sure. And at the same time, there was structure that needed to be put down in my business. Like, for example, just accountability. You know, I am an Enneagram 3. I'm very hardwired for like external validation. I'm an 80s kid. So like this is, what it is. And so I'm a perfectionist. And it was hard for me to hold people accountable because I didn't want people not to like me. Right. And so every time somebody would leave or quit, I'd be like, I'm a bad boss. They're leaving me. And then, again, it's like ego. It's not me. It's they're leaving for a better situation. And so the mindset around I can control what I can control, right? And I can set up better systems. Like these are the expectations. And if you're not meeting those expectations, I need to draw your awareness to it, right? I need to hold you accountable. Like if you're like, for example, we'll give you a perfect example. You are my content team. For you, like if you were not delivering deliverables to me in a timely manner or what we agreed upon, right? Then it would be my responsibility to say to you, hey, Latasha, like it's just, I don't have to be an asshole about it. I could just be like, so I just need to discuss kind of the timelines are getting off. Is there something, do we need to adjust the timelines? Like, how can we make this work? Because right now I can't get my stuff done if you're not meeting yours in time, right? But some people don't like that. It's uncomfortable to have uncomfortable conversations. And on the flip side, if like I think some owners have this problem too, is like if the due date is Friday and on Thursday you're like, where's my shit? The due date's on Friday. So if you want the shit on Thursday, tell them the due date's on Thursday. Like that's a you problem. That's what I recognize. That's a me problem, right? If the due date's Friday, my expectation should be it's there Friday. And then I should iterate and articulate to them like if you are going to be late, you should let me know that on Thursday. Or I shouldn't have to follow you on Saturday and be like, or Monday and be like, hey, where is this stuff?
Yep.
Right. And so that's where I really realized like I needed to step out of. So instead of being, that was where I realized I went from technician, right? Like service provider. I became a manager and then I had to become a leader. And that jump, to be honest, was the hardest thing for me in the business.
Do you think that was the turning point for
Yeah,
Pilates growth?
100%. It was definitely the turning point. I took a lot of onus. I also learned a ton about myself,
Mhm.
like so much about myself and so much about how certain things, like, again, my communication style is my communication style. So if that is, difficult for people, why not hire somebody to be put in that role that has a different communication style, right? And so I hired a manager that was a liaison between myself and the staff that had really good rapport with the staff. And then she also had really good rapport with me. So then it worked out. Like you don't have to necessarily change who you are, I believe. You can just hire, instead of hiring a bunch of mini me's, I needed to hire for my gaps in my strengths.
Do you think that realizing your own shortcomings, your
Mhm.
places where you were maybe holding the team and the business back, do you think hiring for those roles was the thing that propelled Pilates and the growth to where it is now?
Yes. So it was recognizing, like you said, my reaction to things and whether they were true or not true. Like if someone rolled their eyes at a meeting, I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, and meanwhile, they could have had a fucking bug in there. They could have not even been listening to what I was saying. But I was all like, everything was about
Mm,
me. And
mhm,
because I'm so hyper vigilant, I could see everything.
mm,
You know, if they didn't change the clock in the studio when time changed, I was like, that's like a big F you to Krista,
mm,
you know? So, yes. And then I recognize I can no longer operate $1 million business with 18 employees with no, like, what would you call it? Like executive team or leadership team or something. Like I needed another person.
yeah,
And what I realized before was I had tried this, which a lot of business owners I think do. They promote from within. So I promoted technicians to managers, and everyone can tell you like managing and providing the service are two totally different skill sets. So I bit the bullet and I hired my first non-revenue generating employee for a 6-figure salary for an operations manager that was not in the industry, didn't know anything except that he liked CrossFit, you know, but he knew how to operate a business.
mhm,
And that was integral in the growth of and sustainability, I would even say, because he came in and was like, we need to improve the operational efficiencies in this business. Like your internal communication system is terrible. And I knew all of that, but we're just not tech. I mean, you hate it when I don't know what's the shift button or the control, like when I'm trying to copy and paste, like
Just
that's,
it's
I'm
just
like,
Command C.
I know, but I'm like, nope, highlight, copy, paste. Like that was our internal communication.
Yeah.
And so that definitely, myself realizing that, putting myself at cause, recognizing I had to work on myself, and then putting the right systems and people in place in the business
Mhm.
was definitely, so that was like the impetus for that movement forward. And then everything that came, I'm not going to say we didn't hit speed bumps along the way because shortly after that came COVID, but that was definitely like, I know I'm going in the right direction now.
Yeah. Before we talk about COVID, I want to just give people who are listening kind of a mile marker. So
Okay.
let's talk about meltdown day. What was your revenue at that time?
We were probably at about, I would say, $800,000 or $900,000 annually.
Okay. And
Yep.
when you hired Steve, it was Steve, right? You're
Yeah,
talking.
Steve. We would probably just broken $1 million in
Okay.
annual revenue. Yeah.
And then March 2020, what
Ugh.
revenue are we looking at?
I mean, I could tell you that
March 1st.
Q1 of 2020 was really good, you know, as many people will say the economy was doing really well in 2020. Um, I think we were, I mean, I could probably remember. We were going to do over 1 million in revenue that year. So I would say up until that time, like we would have probably been at like $300,000 or so.
Okay. So we're kind of looking at 800,000 meltdown and then 1 million when you hired Steve. And then
Mhm.
we're looking at like probably over 1 million when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about COVID, not in terms of like what you did, because I feel like we've all lived it, right? You all had to figure out what you were doing. I want to know what you did when restrictions were lifted. I know that Florida was a lot more lax than people, like I'm in Colorado. We didn't open up for like 7 months.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you did after COVID hit that you think helped you grow to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I will say I'm one of those people, I'm like a wartime CEO. They say, like, I am, again, I'm an over functioner. I'm like an Enneagram. Like, you put me in chaos, and I am like, I've got you covered. So right off the bat, and my staff tells me this now. I didn't recognize it at the time, but my staff told me this afterwards. They were like, we never doubted you had our back from day one. I spoke to each and every team member and was like, where are you financially? What do you need financially? If we need to cut, like, what do you need to meet? Like, I was like, I am not going down with this ship. Now, had I been in New York where some of my colleagues were, I'm pretty certain I would have ended up closing just
Yeah.
because of how crazy strict like Manhattan was.
Mhm.
Um, so I just wanted, and I do believe we survived COVID, and I survived mentally because I had already started back in 2018. I had hired Steve. I had started putting systems in place. He started taking things off my plate. I had a family situation where I had to take a leave for a little while. Like we kind of, I feel like the universe was like prepping me for this, right? And I had a lot of great resources that I leaned on people for help. So once we were done, like coming out of COVID, some of it helped organically because there were some people that were should have gotten off the bus anyways. And I didn't have like a cause to get them off the bus, but they opted out during COVID for whatever reason. So that helped. Also, because I didn't know a ton about business initially, that we had a big issue where one of the staff members was trying to bring a lawsuit against us and was trying to get all of the team to sue me for misclassification of contractors' employees.
Yeesh.
Yeah. Luckily, it didn't go to court, but it cost me, well, and this was again where my fault. Like as when I open a business, I am responsible for learning and doing things properly, right? So I had skirted that line. So I hired a HR company that do a whole HR audit so that I could prove that like I went through all this stuff. So when I transition people to employ, remember I talk about burnout. I talked about wanting to burn it to the ground. Then we had this incident. And so I felt like it would be too chaotic when I was transitioning people to employees to drop their pay to make up for the tax and payroll. So I kept them all at their contracted rate and then started paying payroll taxes.
Ooh.
So that was a big, obviously, financial hit, but I was worried that the backlash of the culture turn would have been too much. So the
Mm.
other thing that happened during COVID was because we did get to open sooner. Health and fitness didn't get to open right away, but so I opened again in end of June. So that was probably like April, 3 months, but we had to operate at like 50% capacity for a long time. And so what I had to do was I had to go to the team and be like, we have to restructure
Yeah.
pay rates. Like I was paying them like a base and a per head, and I couldn't pay the same base when I was getting a 50% base. And they were all great, and it was fine. And so that was one of the things. And Steve was on board at this time, the COO. And so he helped me along with the mastermind that I was in and other, like they helped me structure it so it was economically feasible.
Mhm.
And then the year after, I actually paid back anybody on my team that lost income the year before. I paid them back. I paid them 75% back of their lost salary the year before. But we kept for 2 years, I just kept saying, please just stick with me. Please just stick with me. Like we're coming out of debt. Like I don't have it in. And I
Yeah.
don't believe that I did take a pay cut, but I don't believe it's right for business owners to pay themselves nothing to pay somebody else. For that, it would have sucked, but I would have let somebody go and like pay myself. You know what I'm saying? Like they could have collected unemployment. So basically nobody got raises for 2 years while we were increasing prices, while we were being more efficient with cost and spend. And that really helped us financially turn the business around.
I was there for some of that, and I know firsthand that it was hard as hell. Not as obviously not as integrated, but we asked your inner circle members like what questions do you have for this interview? And one of the questions was when does it get easier?
Yeah. So I tell people this all the time. It doesn't get easier. You just get better equipped to handle it.
Mm.
So if you're waiting for things to get easier, you're waiting for the wrong thing. What you need to do as a business owner is equip yourself with the tools for you to handle those situations, right? So if you equated it to, oh, I'll wait to get pregnant until my husband and I or my partner and I have more money in the bank. Like there's always a reason not to do it. And it doesn't get easier. You know, it just, we get better. It's like fitness, right? It doesn't get easier to lift 50 pounds. You get stronger. So you're able to lift 50 pounds. I have the same issues. And the people in my masterminds that are doing 8 figures in revenue, they have the same issues too. It's just on scale, right? So we have to put ourselves in the room where we're empowered and motivated and inspired to level up. And we have to give ourselves the training. The same way, if I needed to figure out how to be a better physical therapist, I would go to trainings. If you would want to learn how to be a better writer, you go to trainings, you work those muscles. Like, you have to put yourself in business training courses to be able to handle the hard.
Yeah. So let's think about like the evolution of Christa, right? Like thinking about like the like the Homo sapien evolution scale, right? Like
That's
you were
scary.
a little baby business owner and now you're like upright and walking. What were the phases for you? So it's baby owner Christa who started Pilates on the beach, and then
Mhm.
it's, high schooler Christa
Mhm.
who started Pilates in the Grove, and then it was the divorce with the partners.
Yeah. Single mom, divorced
The
parent.
whole time you were a technician in your business. At what point did you stop being a technician in your business?
So, I mean, I still do see some clients. It's because I love it. I'm a really good therapist. Like, I'm a really good therapist. And so my feeling is to take that gift away from people that need it is a disservice to the clients, right? So I don't have a full schedule. I had saw 2 people this week, but it's really like people that need acute physical therapy care. So I'm still that, but like I said, I saw 2 people this week.
Yeah.
So people, when I go in, they don't even know that I'm the owner. I like it that way. It's great. So that happened. So it started happening in gosh, probably 2016, maybe 2015, 2014, 2015. I broke my arm skiing. And so that was like the impetus of starting to scale back because I had surgery and all that stuff and I couldn't be a therapist. So I
Mhm.
started to scale back. And then fast forward, I think 2 more years, like I said, I had this incident with one of my kids and I had to take a little leave. I was homeschooling him for a while. And so I kind of came off the schedule then. And more of it was I could have done it sooner. I had this thing in my head, 2 things. The ego in my head that like they won't work with someone else, or the ego in my head is I feel bad. They've been my client for 10 years. Like, what am I gonna do? And then finally I was, I was like, it was almost like the universe was like, okay, you're not gonna do it yourself. We're gonna help you, you know? And then I did the final thing was when I said I'm not going back in the business. So that's the other thing. We get pulled back in a lot and you can relate to this. And finally I was just like I'm not getting pulled back in. So if someone resigned, I was like, I'm not back on the schedule. We're going to cancel those classes. And I was like, that's the move. And that's a scary thing when you're like, we're leaving money on the table. But I was like, it's the only way I can 100% pull myself out. And I was like, we have to, like, other people have to step up.
So there's another question from Inner Circle members,
Hmm.
and we can pause the recording here if you don't want to answer this. They want to
Well,
know.
before you answer that, though, I'm curious for you. I want to go back to just to that other thing. So, like, you've been with me now since what, 20, just after 2020, like in 2020, but it's towards the summer. How have you seen my transition? Do you see me any different?
Oh yeah. I when I first came on, I'm pretty sure it was like August 2020, and you were focusing on the Christa Gurka brand, like your
Mhm.
coaching brand, but I was still, helping out with email social marketing on the Pilates and the Grove side. And the systems, you were working with somebody at the time to help you with like project management systems like that. So that was evolving. But I think the big thing for me is seeing you go from still being really involved in the business, even because it was, like you said, you're a wartime CEO. You were still how do I keep my people paid? How am I doing this? How are we adjusting for it? Obviously taking a massive hit in 2020 and still trying to grow your coaching business. And one, I thought you were kind of crazy for that because I was like, that's got to be so stressful. Um, but I think that the growth that I have seen the most is you're so much more aware of the like where you want to be because you can do all of it. You know,
Mhm.
as a very high functioning, over functioning person, you can do all of it. But you have stepped back and you have said, here's what I actually want to do. And I admire it a lot because it's one of the things that I struggle with the most is like, this is what I want to do. I'm not stepping back in to save this because I have hired the right people and I'm going to trust them that they're going to do it. And if they're not going to work out, we have a system to bring another person in and
Mm.
bring them up to speed. But I would say that's probably the biggest transition that I've seen is that, you know, even in terms of like how we launch things now, it's you're a lot more sure in the value that you have and what you want to bring and what people actually need because, you know, you were kind of making the switch right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And by switch, I mean like you were also building Christa Gurka coaching. So I think that it's been watching you grow in terms of like trusting the thing that you've built.
Yeah.
I didn't see it when you didn't trust it, but I have seen you practice it deeply.
Right. And I also, that makes me realize too, one of the things I worked on from a me perspective was asking for help is okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to do everything. You know, even for you, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I can just make that change. And then I'm like, but I don't have to. I can let somebody else do it. Right. Or sometimes I'll even say in Slack, I could be like, well, I'll just do it. And I'm like, no, that's not my job. Like, somebody else can do it. And so me recognizing again as like a perfectionist and stuff, like I can ask for help. It doesn't, and sometimes it's not my job. Like it's, I could, yes, I can do it. I know how to do every role in my company. Like, of course I do. But me doing it is not helping the rest of the team. So me recognizing like it doesn't make me a bad boss or a weak person to say, can you do this for me? Or I need you to do that.
And letting other people do it. I mean,
Exactly.
as somebody, I know you mentioned you were a control freak earlier.
Just a
I
little.
I think most people who run a business are. We have high
Oh,
standards, we have a vision for what we're building. And to say, I need your help and I'm going to let you help me is like one of the hardest things. And I think you do it really well. And I've seen you do it even better the last couple of years, even.
thank you. Yeah, it is true. And I think sometimes one of the things I like to tell business owners too is as they're growing, right? If somebody comes to me, like we just had this, somebody wanted to do a donation based class for the hurricane, like studios that are in, you know, Western North Carolina and Tampa and all that. So someone came to me and was like, I really want to do this. I'll donate. I'll teach at this time. But what people don't realize is like, then that's like work for me to now like, how do we promote it? How do we do it? If you're taking money from people as a donation, you have to know where the money is going. And so I said to the team, I love this. I think it's a great idea. I can't take on this role. If somebody wants to get this information and this is all the things we need, I will help you, but like these are all the things we need. Old Krista would have been like, what a troll, like what a Grinch. This is a fun thing. Like people are gonna think you're mean if you don't want to give money and you're selfish. And I had this big thing about being called selfish again, right? So like, but I was like, this doesn't make me mean. It just means I can't take this is still a big responsibility. And so somebody on my team was like, I'll handle the administrative stuff. I was like, great. So if people come to me now with projects or initiatives, a lot of times I'll be like, would you like to head that?
Yeah.
I'm happy to help, but if you want to take this on and own this initiative, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, that's people listening probably feel that deeply because they hire people and those people have ideas and then they feel like, oh, I have to do these. I have to do this. This is more work for me. You know, they
Right.
had a great idea, but that's more work on my plate. And it's like, no, you can say that's a great idea. How can I support you in getting it done?
Exactly. That's a great way to do it. I'd love to support you and you taking the lead on that.
Yeah. But it is something that I think you do really well. And I think you've built a team that they're independent enough, but they understand the mission and everything that Pilates and the Grove stands for. I think you've made that uber clear. And I think that's something that I think a lot of fit biz owners look to you for, is that like you have built something that you could truly step away from, which leads me to my last question
What?
that we could cut if you don't want to have it in here. Do you want to talk about the potential sale? Because we had inner circle members asking about
Ask
it.
about that. Yep. So somebody asked, when did you decide if you wanted to, sell the business? And the truth is, when I first started the business, people ask me all the time, and I did think I did a podcast interview about this, how I hated the question, what's your exit strategy?
Mhm.
And the reason I hated it was because I didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I can't see 3 days ahead of me. What am I going to do in 10 years? I don't know. But again, that was just also where I was in my life.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I recognized, I sat in on a panel of like exit strategies. And when I realized that I could sell my business was the day that I started preparing my business for the day that if I wanted to sell it, I could. Because I do now believe, I just thought, I don't know, I'd sell the equipment and then close up shop when I was ready to retire. Right. Because I was always like, well, why would anyone want to buy my business? They can just open their own and do it all. But that's how little I knew about business when people are like, it's way more valuable to have something that's
Yeah.
up and running and investing, and invest in it and already going. So that's when I decided. It got more real as I was, pulling myself out of the business a little bit more. I just wanted to have more like freedom of time, even though I really do have that now.
Yeah.
I'm an empty nester now. My kids are both in college. And so it got to the point that, I was offered the opportunity to sell. And I was like, I don't know, could this work? And that, that's kind of, I had set the business up that it was ready for
Yeah.
sale, right? It didn't need me. I could go away. I went away for a month in the summer and the business operated great. So that was kind of my recollection of like, I don't just have to walk away from this. I built this and I could trade it in for value.
Yeah. I have one last question if you want
Yeah,
to round this out.
sure.
If Krista now could talk to baby Krista starting Pilates on the beach, what information would you give her?
That's such a good question. And I think about that now, but I think the hard part is I just didn't know shit back then. It's like if people say to me like, what would you tell you like the high school version of yourself? And really people did tell me things like, if she just worked a little harder, if she like did a little more. But I was like, dude, I'm getting A's and B's. I'm like a good athlete. I'm getting good grades. What do I have to work harder for? Right. So nothing anybody could have said to me at that point would have said, sit in the front of the class. Like I wouldn't have changed my behavior. And so I don't know that there's a lot that I would have told myself, but if I had taken advice, if I had asked for advice from other people, it would have been to learn more about business sooner. Like it's okay to ask for help. I really thought like if I started asking for business help, people would know that I was like a huge fraud and they'd be like, well, why am I working with someone that doesn't know what they're doing? So I now recognize none of us really know what we're doing. And so, at least on the business side, like in terms of finances and operations and all of that stuff. So, that would have been seek out mentorship in ways the same way I sought out mentorship on how to make myself like a really good therapist or Pilates instructor. I think that probably, well, that and maybe like investing a little bit more money. We were definitely cash poor for a long time. And one of the things I'm really, really proud of this year, and I'm not afraid to say it, I think I'm gonna actually do a podcast episode on it that's called Let's Talk About Money, is Pilates in the Grove for the first time ever has multiple six figures in the bank.
Wow.
And it is a very different place of operating your business when you have that. I just feel it gives you options. And we operated from a cash poor standpoint and a scarcity mentality and my mindset for so long that I was from a place of like, I can't spend, I can't spend, I can't spend. Oh, that's even like, oh, sit first class. No, 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 we can't do that. Like now I'm at a place of like, you know, the money I invest is going to come back to me. So if I find a mastermind or a mentorship program or something that's $20,000, $25,000, and I know that that thing is going to help me in some way, I am good investing that money. I recognize now it's going to come back. But it's also a lot easier when you have the money in the bank, you know?
It's a lot easier.
Yeah. But I will tell you, it took us 15 months. 15 months. That's it. 15 months of being really intentional with how we spent, being really intentional with optimization and clear to get to the point that we have multiple six figures in the bank. And I didn't have that forever. Like it literally just happened in the last 12 to 15 months.
I think that's a helpful time frame too, because people are maybe thinking that it takes, oh yeah, 10 years to get to
No,
that
no,
point.
no. That's why
We're
I'm saying
operating from that point. Yeah.
it took, and sometimes people don't recognize the bigger the operation, sometimes the more expensive,
Mhm.
So we have two locations and it's not like we pay the same amount of money for our software system for each location, even though it's the same software, right?
Right.
Like there are certain things that are just double the price.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's like, that's why I tell people like it has to be profitable,
Yeah.
right? And so it only took 12 to 15 months, of being very, and that wasn't me cutting my salary. That wasn't, if anything, everyone got raises,
Yeah.
so,
Well, and that's possible at scale too. So for the amount of revenue that you're bringing in, but it's also possible for the amount of revenue that somebody else is bringing
right,
in. They
exactly.
could have maybe not multiple six figures if they're only making six figures, but they can have a really good chunk of that profit if they, intentionally work towards those business strategies that help
Yeah.
streamline everything.
Yeah. I mean, even if somebody made, say somebody made like four or $500,000 a year, right? If they're operating at a, 15 to 20% profit margin, they could have 90, $100,000
Yeah.
in the bank, right?
Yep.
That's a great, and not including their like
Correct.
after their salary, right? So you're right. At scale, it's good, but and I wanted to say that so people realize it's not 10 years. I mean, certainly before COVID, we didn't operate with that. From
Mhm.
2020 to 2023, we had negative dollars in the bank. So it was really from like 23 to 24, I think we started 23 at like net zero.
Mhm.
So we started 23 at like break even, no
Yeah.
extra cashola. And then from 23 to 24, I think we ended up with like maybe a 4% profit. And
Mhm.
we've jumped from 20 and 24 up to like 18. And so it just takes
Yeah.
being intentional.
But your salary was never cut during that time.
My salary was never cut. If anything, it's gone up.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody listening. You don't have to sacrifice your salary and your sweat, blood, tears
No,
to
no, no,
make
no,
your business work.
no, you don't.
It's
And by the
hard.
way, if you are doing that, you should just go get a job. Like I get it, but like I mean, unless you don't need the money. If you don't need the money, fine, no problem. But if you need the money and you are paying yourself $40,000 a year, like with the stress of running a business that is not a new business, but like, go get a job. Go get a job. Why put yourself under that stress for like half the amount, working 80 hours a week? Somebody said this quote one time. They're like, entrepreneurs are the only people that will leave a stable, high paying job to work double the hours for half amount of pay.
True though.
Yeah.
It's true.
So, and I'm not saying that in terms of like, screw your dreams. It's just more like you should pay yourself. We should pay ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we're the first people to get cut, like the point of the business is to give you money.
And free.
So yeah, that's the point. And so if you have to, it sucks. It sucks. It's the point though, is you or someone else, like it's maybe a hard decision as a business owner where you have to let somebody else go. Now, the problem is if you don't want to do the work, that's another thing. That's another
Yep.
situation. But
But all of that to say that your business, despite how hard it is,
Mhm.
despite literally a bunch of obstacles, you have gotten to a place where you are profitable, you are paying yourself, you are out of the day to day for the most part. I know
Mhm.
there's still some things that you do, but it's because those are the things you chose to be involved in.
Mhm. Yep. I still sit in the sales and the marketing seat on my,
Mhm.
in the, I guess the org chart in my company
Yeah.
with you, and you help create the content, but I sit in the marketing and sales seat because that's also like growth oriented in terms of like where are we going and what kind of messaging do we want to put out. But you're the one that really creates the content for me. I'm not writing the, the stuff. So, but yeah, someone's the operations director, someone sits in the finance seat. Um, I go in from time to time. It's so pleasant to go in now. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. Everyone does their job. Like they know who to go to. It's not me if there's a problem. It's great. It took, I don't know how many years, like 5 or 6 years to get here, but it's really amazing.
Yeah. So in the evolutionary scale of Krista, you're walking upright right now. What's the next evolution? Like the Optimus Prime version?
Yeah, I know. I'm at such a crossroads right now because there's a part of me that's like, so I feel like I'm a born teacher, and like so one of the things with physical therapy and Pilates, I just love teaching people how they can move better in their bodies and feel better, and they don't have to be handcuffed to this like diagnosis that somebody gave them, right? And so now my other passion is like to teach women business owners, like, you don't have to have an MBA. You don't have to have venture capital. You don't have to have investment. Not even me. You can learn what you need to do to have these businesses, right? And so let me help others the same way I came up. So part of me is like, I'd love to do that and then kind of just like travel and see my kids and stuff like that. And then there's another part of me that recognizes I still don't know all of like, when I'm in the room with some of my mastermind people and they're talking about like their investments and how they're scaling, and like, then I'm like, wow, there's a whole other world here of people that have money. So
Mm.
now when I'm like, I could have money,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with that money? And what am I going to do to change the trajectory, not only of my life, but of like my kids' life, right? Help my family out. And so there's like, that's the next evolution. And some of me is like, well, at 50 and 51, do I want to be doing that? Or do I just want to sit on like my camper van with Duncan and drink a cocktail? I don't know. I don't know. I vacillate back and forth between the two.
TBD. There's still time to decide.
TBD, exactly.
Well,
So,
on that note, we will end this. I hope that everybody listening is a little bit clearer on your path and also seeing that, like, I think the part is that, like, you didn't get lucky. There wasn't a sudden windfall. Like, there have been obstacles the whole way through. It is self-funded. It's work that you've put in, but that sweat equity has paid off.
oh, for sure.
And that you're seeing the fruits of all of that labor, but it was not, a 1 year trajectory to get here. Um,
No. And I hear on podcasts before, like on business podcasts, where they're like, "So what do you think? Do you think it was like skill or do you think it was luck?" And it's funny because people go to like you'll get the gamut. People are like, "Oh, 90% luck,
yeah,
90% skill." I One of the things is like I will not give up. Like I will not go down with a ship. Like, I'm not going on the lifeboat. I'm staying on the ship and I'm putting it
yeah.
on. Like that's one thing because I'm also very stubborn. And at the same time, I think the luck things were things like I feel like I've been lucky to be introduced to certain people. I feel like I've been lucky to be put myself in the room with certain people. I am a white female, right? So like I have a partner that is equally invested in me, like in terms of very supportive of my career. So if I want to say luck, I'm going to say those are the things that maybe helped my foundation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like hard work and people also like helping me when I was ready to ask for help and surrounding myself with amazing people
Well,
like
I
you.
think you're doing a great job. And I hope people listening to this can kind of hear themselves in some of it and also see the story that, a lot of us are encountering as business owners where it's like,
Mhm.
shit, there's another thing coming up and I don't know if I can fight this fight. And you can if you want it.
Everything is figure outable.
It is.
And the figure outable might be, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's okay
That
too.
is 100% true.
Well, Latasha, thank you so much for interviewing me. And you didn't punk me, so I'm very happy with that. I thought you were going to pull out like a high school picture from like the internet and be like, so can we revisit the day you chose to wear this as an outfit?
Well, hindsight,
Thank
I
you for
should have
not
done
doing
it.
that. So, all right, people, the next couple episodes will be other business owners that will talk about their journey. And the other thing is, if you do want to ask me a question or maybe be featured on the podcast, I have a new link now on my website. That's if you go to www.christagurka.com/messages, christagurka.com/messages, you can leave me a voice memo there that will tell me something you want to hear or ask me a question. And it's a great way to get featured on the podcast. All right. So thanks, Miss Latasha.
You are
And
welcome.
bye for now, everyone.